Hi everyone, I hope you're all doing well, and I hope that everyone is doing pretty well with the course so far and has found the exercises that we've done with the thesis statements and specifically the peer review of them to be helpful. So at this point, you should have already submitted your preliminary thesis statements to the discussion board for last week. You should have also gotten some feedback. Now, this is simply the first step. So you'll have that feedback that you can use to kind of revise your argument and try to figure out how to sharpen it as much as possible. You will also, probably within the next few days, get feedback from me about your argument. I'm currently going through the process of reading the thesis statements and trying to figure out how I can give you a couple tips for sharpening things and making things, everything a little bit clearer. So you'll have feedback from your peer reviewer. You will have feedback from me, certainly within the next week, and you will also, in the relatively near future, be getting full feedback from the librarian. And again, please make an appointment with them, get some feedback on your thesis statement. It's going to help you out a ton as we move forward and as we start to put the paper together. So you'll have those 3 sets of feedback that you can use. And if you ever, as you are writing the paper, if you ever feel like you need some additional help with your argument, and that is totally normal as you research and as you write, let me know. I'm more than happy to look at future versions of your argument and to help you out as much as possible. So right now I'm in the process of reading through all of the arguments and trying to figure out how to help everyone as much as possible. But one of the things I wanted to do is kind of put together some tips based off of what I'm seeing so far, because I think that there are kind of general ideas that we can keep in mind as we are putting together our thesis statements, and I think they should help us out a lot, even before you get the individualized feedback on your argument. So the first thing I want to talk about in terms of thesis statements is what an argument is. So for me, an argument can be defined this way. An argument is a statement with which a reasonable person can disagree. I'll repeat that just so that kind of sinks in a little bit. So an argument is a statement with which a reasonable person can disagree. That's kind of a strange concept, but it's incredibly, incredibly important. If we have an argument, if we have a thesis statement that is going far enough, it means that someone else can come in and look at the exact same information, the exact same evidence, and the exact same topic and come up with a different idea. And that idea can actually completely oppose your own. That is a good thing. You want someone to be able to disagree with you. If they can't, or if that kind of disagreement forces them into a silly or a bad position, that means you're not taking it far enough. All right, so that's the general definition of an argument. I want to give you a couple of basic tips for creating a strong argument. Keep in mind that a strong argument basically has 3 main characteristics. The first is that a strong argument is clear. All right, so an argument that has all of these fancy words and all of these ideas that are just thrown at a reader in order to confuse them and have them give up is not a good argument. You want your reader to be able to read your thesis statement and know exactly what your position is. Don't fall victim to the temptation of just wanting to confuse a reader with fancy words. You don't need that. It is far harder and far more important to get your specific idea across clearly. All right, so a strong argument is clear. A strong argument is also direct. Try not to fall into the trap of hiding behind a question, for example. A question is simply something to throw out there in order to get the conversation started. However, a question is not a direct argument. A good thesis statement makes you vulnerable, puts you in a space where someone can disagree with you. And part of that is being direct about your point. Don't hide behind words, don't hide behind questions, don't hide behind other authority. own your own perspective, own your own position. So the third main characteristic of a strong thesis is that a strong thesis statement is supportable with evidence. Make your argument specific enough that you can support it within the page limits of the essay. So you don't want something that's too small, you don't want something that's too big. All right, so for example, my kind of typical example of an argument that is too big is something like this. If you have an argument that says, since the dawn of time, men have oppressed women. You can imagine that as an argument. Now, in order to support that argument, you would need a ton of evidence. You would probably have to write 9 or 10 books on the topic. You'd have to write an argument about, or a book about the dawn of time. No one knows when that is. Are you going to go 100 years back, 200 years back, 10,000 years back, a million years back, right? And then, so you have to write about that. Then you have to write about every single location in the entire world. Was there sexism in the US 200 years ago? Was there sexism in Ethiopia 100,000 years ago? You have to do a ton of work, and you can't do it all. So give yourself an argument that is manageable, that you can support within a reasonable amount of time. So those are the 3 main characteristics of a strong argument. So a strong argument is clear, that's number 1, direct, number 2, and then number 3, it is supportable with evidence. All right, now, the other thing I want you to keep a lookout for, and this is really, really important, are fake thesis statements. These are arguments that look like argument, or statements that look like arguments, but they're not actually positions. There are 3 main kinds of fake thesis statements I want you to keep on the lookout for, and you may have them in your own argument, and you may be tempted to have them. So the first example of a fake argument is a question. And I mentioned this before when it comes to a thesis statement being direct. So a question is very, very useful in an introduction. It sets up the conversation. However, a question cannot be a position. So if you have something along the lines of, is euthanasia ethical? Right? That's your question. That's what you're kind of focusing on. That's not an argument. That's not a position. So a position or a thesis statement addresses or answers that question. All right, so a fake thesis statement, or a question, is a fake thesis statement. The second example of a fake thesis statement is a statement of topic. This is incredibly, incredibly common, but it's not an argument. So if you have a paper that has as its thesis statement something along the lines of, in this paper, I am going to write about racism in the United States. That is a topic. However, it is not an argument. It's not a position. It simply states what the paper is going to be about and what you are going to kind of analyze and try to understand. So, in your thesis, make sure that you are creating a position that makes you vulnerable to disagreement. You want to have that counter argument, right? And you can imagine this for anything. If you have an argument that says something along the lines of, I think the United States needs to have stricter gun laws, you can see the other side of the aisle. Someone can come in and say, well, if you have stricter gun laws, it actually, first of all, might not make us any safer. There's a lot of evidence to suggest that. Or someone might come in and say that it violates the Second Amendment. You need to see that other side. So give yourself or push yourself to have a position that is not just a statement of the topic or controversy, right? We need to know your position on it. The second example of a fake thesis statement is a summary of someone else's position. This is a way of hiding. If you have an argument that is along the lines of, as this expert says, da 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 da, right, etc., you complete that idea, that is an argument. However, it's someone else's, it's not your own. So it's a fake argument for you. You're simply hiding behind someone else. You want your argument to be your own. And so it's your own position, it's based off your own ideas, and it's based off your own analysis. So again, Three main kinds of fake arguments are questions. Try to avoid them as your argument. They will trap you. A statement of the topic or controversy. So these just say what you are writing about rather than saying what your position is. And then the third one is a summary of someone else's position. And keep in mind, these are fake arguments. So on a paper and for the argument itself, they would actually receive an F. They're not positions. They're not thesis statements. Okay, so I hope that was helpful. If you have any questions about this or if you need any further help with your arguments, please let me know.